First graders, it is Tuesday, a good Tuesday morning. We are in chapter 4 of The Boxcar Children. Chapter 4, Henry has 2 surprises. Jessie whispered, "Keep still." The 3 children did not say a word. They sat quietly in the boxcar looking at the bushes. "I wonder if it's a bear," thought Benny. Soon, something came out. But it wasn't a bear. It was a dog, which hopped along 3 legs, crying softly and holding up a front paw. "Oh, it's all right," said Jessie. "It's only a dog, but I think he's hurt." The dog looked up and saw the children, and then he wagged his tail. "Poor dog," said Jessie. "Are you lost? Come over here and let me look at your paw." The dog hopped over to the boxcar and the children got out. Jessie looked at the paw and said, "Oh dear, you poor dog. There's a big thorn in your foot." The dog stopped crying and looked at Jessie. "Good dog," said Jessie. "I can help you, but maybe it will hurt." The dog looked up at Jessie and wagged his tail again. "Violet," ordered Jessie, "please wet my handkerchief in the brook." Jessie sat down on the stump and took the dog in her lap. She patted him and gave him a little piece of bread. Then she began to pull out the thorn. It was a long thorn, but the dog did not make any noise. Jessie pulled and pulled, and at last the thorn came out. Violet had a wet handkerchief ready. Jessie put it around the dog's paw, and he looked up to her and wagged his tail a little. "He wants to say thank you, Jessie," cried Violet. "He's a good dog not to cry." "Yes, he is," agreed Jessie. "Now, I had better hold him for a while so that he will lie down and rest his leg." "We can surprise Henry," remarked Benny. "Now we have a dog." "So we can," said Jessie, "but that was not my surprise. I was going to get a lot of blueberries for supper." "Can't we look for blueberries while you hold the dog?" asked Violet. "Yes, you can," said Jessie. "Look over there by the big trees." Benny and Violet ran over to look. "Oh, Jessie," cried Benny, "did you ever see so many blueberries?" "I guess 5 blueberries. No, I guess 10 blueberries." Jessie laughed. "I guess there are more than 5 or 10, Benny," she said. "Get a clean towel and pick them into it." For a while, Jessie watched Benny and Violet picking blueberries. "Most of Benny's blueberries are going to his mouth," she thought with a laugh. "Maybe that's just as well. He won't get so hungry waiting for Henry to come back with the milk." She carried the dog over to the children and sat beside them, the dog on her lap. With her help, the towel was soon full of blueberries. "I wish we had some dishes," Jessie said. "Then we could have blueberries and milk." "Never mind," said Violet. "When Henry comes, we can eat some blueberries and then take a drink of milk." When Henry came, he had some heavy bundles. He had 4 bottles of milk in a bag, a loaf of brown bread, and also some fine yellow cheese. He looked at the dog. "Where did you get that fine dog?" he cried. "He came to us," said Benny. "He's a surprise for you." Henry went over to the dog, who wagged his tail. Henry patted him and said, "He ought to be a good watchdog." Excuse me. "Why is the handkerchief on his foot?" "He had a big thorn in his foot," answered Violet, and Jessie took it out and put it on the handkerchief, and then put on the handkerchief. "It hurt him, but he didn't cry or growl." "His name is Watch," remarked Benny. "Oh, is it?" asked Jessie, laughing. "Watch is a good name for a watchdog." "Did you bring some milk?" asked Benny, looking hungrily at the bottles. "I should say I did," replied Henry. 4 bottles. "Poor old Benny," said Jessie. We'll have dinner now. Or is it supper?" "It must be supper," said Henry, "for soon we'll have to go to bed." But if you didn't know this, older generations used to call dinner like when they would eat around lunchtime or so, and then supper like before evening. Or if they ate in the later afternoon, they'd call it dinner, and then supper was like your meal before it gets dark or before, you tuck into bed. So my grandparents used to call it supper. Do your parents call it supper? Dinner? Both? Eh? Oh man, I forgot my spot. There it is. It must be supper, said Henry, for soon we'll have to go to bed. Tomorrow we'll eat 3 times, said Jessie. Now Jessie liked to have things in order, and so she put the laundry bag on some pine needles for a tablecloth. Then she cut the loaf of brown bread into 5 big pieces. The cheese was cut into 4. Dogs don't like cheese, remarked Benny. The poor little boy was glad, too, for he was very hungry. Violet put the 4 bottles of milk on the table, and Jessie put some blueberries and cheese at each place. Blueberries, cried Henry. Jessie, you had 2 surprises for me. I'm sorry we haven't had any cups, Jessie said. We'll have to drink out of the bottles. Now, come and sit down. So supper began. Look, Benny, said Henry. You take some blueberries, then eat some brown bread, then some cheese, then take a drink of milk. It's good, said Benny. He began to put more blueberries into his mouth. The dog had supper, too. Jessie gave him bread as he lay on the ground beside her, and he drank the milk out of her hand. When supper was over, there was some milk left in each bottle. We'll have the rest of the milk for breakfast, said Jessie. Tonight, we're going to sleep on beds. Let's get some pine needles now. Soon the children had a big pile. Henry jumped into the boxcar, and Jessie gave him the pine needles. He made 4 beds in one end of the car. This side is the bedroom, said Jessie. What will the other side be? Asked Benny. The other side? Asked Jessie. Let me think. I guess that will be the sitting room, and maybe some of the time it will be the kitchen. Then she said, Come now. Come get washed. She took the cake of soap and went down to the brook. That will be fun, Benny, said Violet. We'll splash our paws in the brook just as little Brown Bear does. She knew that Benny did not like to be washed. The children were all very hot, and so they were glad to splash in the cold water. Benny put cold water and soap on his face with the others and dried his hands on a towel. We'll have to have a line to dry these towels on, said Jessie. She took the string out of the laundry bag and tied one end to his tree. The other end of the string she tied to the boxcar. This made a good clothesline. When she had washed one towel and Violet had washed the other one, they hung both towels on the clothesline. It looks like home, said Henry. See the washing? He laughed. Jessie was thinking, we ought to get some water to drink before we go to bed, she said. But what shall we put it in? Let's put all the milk into 2 bottles, said Henry. Then we can fill the other 2 with water. Good, said Jessie. You go alone to the fountain, Henry. You can hide if anyone comes along. Henry went out very quietly and soon came back with 2 bottles full of cold water. I'm thirsty again. All this talk about water. Are you thirsty? Pause it if you need to get a drink of water. Benny drank a little, but he was almost asleep. The other children helped him into the boxcar. Then they all climbed in, Jessie carrying the dog. He lay down at once beside her. It was so hot that we'll have to leave the door open, said Henry. Soon they were fast asleep, dog and all. The moon came up, but they did not see it. This was the first time in 4 days that they could go to sleep at night. To go to sleep at night as children should. So they finally got a nice, relaxing night of sleep. That's awesome. On a full stomach. That's good. With shelter. Chapter 5. The Explorers Find Treasure. Oh, and the picture shows the dog still with him. That's awesome. The next morning, Jessie woke up first, and she got up at once, for she was the housekeeper. The dog sat in the door of the car and looked at her as she jumped down to get the milk for breakfast. Then he jumped down after her. Jessie walked down by the little brook and was stopped to look at the waterfall. It was beautiful. I must look in the refrigerator, she said with a laugh. It was a funny refrigerator. There was a rock behind the waterfall, and the night before Jessie had put the 2 bottles of milk in a hole in this rock. Now she took out the bottles and found the milk was very cold. Is it good? Called Benny, who sat in the car door. It is delicious, cried Jessie. It is cold, too. She got up into the car with the milk and sat down beside Benny. Then the 4 children drank the milk for breakfast. Henry said, Today, I'll go to town and try to get some work to do. I can cut grass or work in a garden or something. Then we'll have something besides milk for breakfast. He washed his hands and face and started out. I'm so glad you have a dog, Jessie, he said. Goodbye, I'll be back at noon. The children looked after Henry, and then they looked at Jessie. What are we going to do now, Jessie? Benny asked his sister. Well, Benny, answered Jessie, we'll go exploring and look for treasures. We'll begin here at the car and look until we find a dump. What's a dump? Asked Benny. Oh, Benny, said Violet, you know what a dump is. Old tin cans and old dishes and bottles and junk. Are old tin cans and dishes treasures? Benny wanted to know. They will be treasures for us, answered Jessie, laughing. And wheels? Asked Benny again. Will there be any wheels at the dump? Yes, maybe, replied Violet, but cups, Benny, and plates, and maybe spoons. You only like to drink milk out of a cup. Oh, yes, agreed Benny politely, but anyone could see that his mind was still on wheels. The explorers started walking down the old rusty tracks with Watch hopping along on 3 legs. The other paw, still tied up with Jessie's handkerchief, was held off of the ground. But the dog looked very happy. He liked these kind of children. They all walked along through the woods, looking this way and that way. After a while, the old track came into the sun, and the explorers found that they were on top of a hill. They could look down and see the town below them. Henry's down there, said Jessie. Benny was walking along behind his 2 sisters. Suddenly, he cried happily, Look, Jessie! There's a treasure! A wheel! The girls looked where he was pointing. They saw a big dump with many old bottles and tin cans on it. There also were wheels and cups. Indeed, there were dishes of all kinds. Oh, Benny, cried Jessie, you saw the treasures first. What should we do without what would we do without you? Violet ran over to the dump. Here's a white pitcher, Jessie cried. Jessie looked at it. It was all right, with only one small crack. Here's a big white cup, too, she said happily. Can you use a teapot, Jessie? Asked Benny. Yes, indeed, she replied. We can put water in it. I have found 2 cups and a bowl. Let's look for spoons, too. Violet held up what she had found. 5 spoons covered with rust. Good, said Jessie. Here's a big kettle. Let's pile all the dishes in. Then we can carry them back to the boxcar. Benny had found 4 wheels just like he wanted and laid them to one side. Now he held up a pink cup. There was a big crack in it, but it had a handle. This will be my big pink cup, said Benny. I hope it'll hold milk, said Jessie, laughing. It's a beautiful cup, Benny. The children laid all their treasures, even the wheels, on a board, and the girls carried the board back to the boxcar between them. They put the dishes down by the brook. Now we must wash them, said Jessie. Excuse me. All right, agreed Benny. We'll wash my pink cup. And never did a little boy hand dishes so carefully to his sisters as Benny did. Didn't want them to break. The girls washed the dishes with soap, and Jessie used the sand to get the rust off the spoons. There, she said, washing the last shining spoon. How fine they look. But I'm afraid they still aren't clean enough to eat from. When Henry comes home, we'll get him to build a fire. Then we can have hot water to rinse them, and they will be very clean. The children sat back and admired the dishes. Suddenly, Violet cried, Oh, I know where to put them. Come and see what I found in the car last night. Both girls looked in at the door. Look on the door on the other side of the car, said Violet. All Jessie saw were 2 pieces of wood nailed to the closed door of the car, but she knew at once what was in Violet's mind. She ran to get the board, and they had carried from the dump, and laid it carefully across the 2 pieces of wood. It made a fine shelf for dishes. There, said Jessie. The children could hardly wait to put the shining dishes on the shelf. Let's put them on now, said Violet, and see how they look without waiting to rinse them. When they were on the shelf, Violet picked some white and yellow flowers and put them in a cup full of water in the middle of the shelf. There, said Jessie, stepping back to look at it. You said there 3 times, remarked Benny happily. So I did, replied Jessie, laughing, and I'm going to say it again. She pointed into the woods and said, There! Henry was coming through the woods, and he carried many funny-looking bundles in his arms. Here's the shelf before we move on to Henry. But he would not open his bundles or tell what he had been doing until it was time for dinner. "Where did you get the dishes?" he cried when he saw the shelf. "We went exploring," said Violet, "and found a big dump." The children began telling him about their treasures. Then he told them about the tin cans and his pink cup and his wheels. Jessie took out the big kettle and asked him about building a fire. "We want to use the dishes to eat from," she told him, "and it's hard to get them clean in cold water." So Henry made a small fire in an open place where it could not burn anything. He put big stones all around it. "We ought to have a fireplace," he remarked. Jessie cleaned the kettle with sand and filled it with water. Then Henry put it on the fire. Soon the water was boiling, and Jessie rinsed the dishes carefully. "Now, I know they're clean enough to eat from," she said happily. Ooh, yeah, the next chapter is pretty long. I'm going to stop right there. First graders, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have an awesome Tuesday. Holy moly, was it raining last night? Did you see some of that rain? Wow. I was actually driving in it, and it was bad. I had to slow down several times just because some of the puddles that I went through, I wasn't even on the side of the road. I was on the next lane over, and the puddles were so big from the side of the road, they went into the middle of the road. And when I go through them, it would just cover the truck, and I couldn't see anything, even with my windshield wipers going. So I had to slow down several times. I saw a bunch of lightning. Luckily, I made it home safely. Yeah, where were you during the storm? What were you doing? That would be a great thing to write about if you have extra time to write about something. Yeah, that was cool. Today, my plan is to, I have a little bit of cleaning up to do around the house. Not pulling weeds. Nope, not going to do that. Let's see. Ooh, I might play some Pokemon cards with my son. I had him build some decks because he has so many cards. I can be like, "Hey Max, can you make me a deck with psychic cards and lightning cards? Or can I have fighting cards and water element cards?" And he'll be like, "Yep," and he'll go and build the decks, and then we play. So we're going to be doing that today. Maybe play some board games. Yeah, just kind of hanging out. I hope you have a good day, and I will see you tomorrow.